Worthy Grand Knight, Worthy Deputy Grand Knight. I was kind of struggling with finding a topic for this evening. I wanted to do something that was relevant to where we are in the liturgical year, so Advent or Christmas, but I didn't want to do the standard St. Nicholas or where the nativity scene comes from presentation, and I just wanted to find something that was kind of fun or trivial or of interest, but that didn't tax me too much intellectually. So I finally found myself researching the question of why do we celebrate Christmas on December 25th? And I'd like to just share with you some of the things that I found. So the first thing is that December 25th is liturgical, but not magisterial. So there's never been any sort of doctrinal decree that Jesus was born on that date. In theory, the date could be moved. I don't anticipate that, but it's not something that is a matter of dogma. Second, December 25th was not chosen to Christianize a pagan celebration. This is something that we hear over and over again, that, oh, this is a thinly, it's on December 25 because it's a thinly Christianized version of the Roman Feast of Saturnalia, or it was the church's attempt to stamp out the festival of Sol Invictus, or it's the celebration of this pagan god's birth or that pagan god's birth. But these claims don't really stand up very well when you dig into them. The Feast of Saturnalia ran from December 17 to 23rd. The dates don't line up. Hippolytus, writing in 202, tells us that the Christians in Rome were celebrating Christmas on December 25th in his day. And the Feast of Sol Invictus wasn't instituted until 274, so 72 years later, right? So we can't be copying a festival that didn't come into existence until decades after we had already settled on December 25. The winter solstice is the 21st. The pagans had lots of festivals and lots of gods, so there's no date on the calendar that you could choose that wouldn't be close to some pagan celebration. It just isn't really a very good argument when you dig into it. It is the case that some of the trappings, like the use of holly leaves to decorate, do have pagan precedent, but the idea that the date itself was chosen as an effort to Christianize a pagan holiday really doesn't stand up to too much scrutiny. I found this interesting. The early church wasn't concerned with the day that a person was born. The church considered, it still does, that a person comes into being at conception. They were interested in the date of conception, not the date in which the person emerged from the womb, which affects all of this, in a kind of roundabout way. But I found that really interesting. The early Christians were much more interested in the dating of Easter than they were in the date of Christ's birth. Getting that right was the focus of the early church. And we don't know the day of the crucifixion, but we can narrow it down quite a bit. We do know that he was crucified on Pontius Pilate, and we know that Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea from 26 to 36. And we know that Passover fell on a Thursday, it's the Last Supper, and that he's crucified on the Friday, and there's only certain years between 26 and 36 when that would have occurred. So we can narrow this down, using the biblical clues, to know that the date had to be between March 25th and April 6th. There was a Jewish belief that prophets died on the anniversary of their conception. It's one of that prophets lived in this exact time frame from conception to death. And so the thought was, if Jesus died between March 25th and April 6th, then he must have been, conceived on those, within that same time period, and then he must have been born 9 months later. So between December 25th, which is when we celebrate Christmas in the West, or January 6th, which is the traditional date in Eastern Christianity. Of course, not counting the day of Christmas itself, you have 12 days between those two dates, which is why Christmas will forever was celebrated over 12 days, and why we're stuck with that Christmas carol. Some have tried to determine the date of Christ's birth by looking at the birth of John the Baptist. Luke tells us that John's father, Zechariah, was a temple priest in the course of Abijah, and that he was in the temple offering incense when the angel appeared to him and advised him that his wife Elizabeth would soon conceive. The various courses of Jewish priests, there were 24 of them. They served 2 8-week or 8-day rotations twice a year. But there were 3 major festivals also during the year when all of the priests from all of the different courses would have been attendants at the temple. And there's this quick passing reference in Luke to the crowds gathered outside the temple, which clues us in that when the angel appeared to Zechariah, it must have been during one of those 3 festivals. Tabernacles is in the fall, and the dates, move around a bit. But if that announcement to Zechariah took place during the Feast of Tabernacles, then John the Baptist would have been conceived mid-October. And we know also from Luke's Gospel that when Mary conceives Jesus, she goes to the hill country to see Elizabeth, and we're told that it's the 6th month. So she's not fully 6 months, she's 5.5 months. She's in the 6th month of Elizabeth of her pregnancy. Which, if we kind of move out from October, brings us to a date in late March or early April for the conception of Jesus, and then following 9 months later would bring us to late December, early January type day for his birth. And finally, we need to keep in mind that the early Christians had access to sources that we no longer have. For example, there were 2 Egyptian bishops, there was a bishop named Papias and a bishop named Hegesippus, who both wrote at the beginning of the 2nd century. Hegesippus was probably inspired to write by the death of the Apostle John. When the last apostle died, it prompted him to write. He wrote a 5-volume history of the church from the resurrection to his time, which is just a little over 70 years. We don't have Hegesippus's books anymore. We just have some individual quotes from them that appear in the works of later writers. But St. Jerome did, and Epiphanius of Salamis did. Similarly with Papias, we have 10 surviving fragments of Papias, who wrote quite a bit about the family of Jesus. And we have in one of the surviving fragments, he talks about his sources, one of them being the daughters of the Apostle Philip. So when we look to some of these people who in the 4th century who are telling us that Jesus was born in winter and toward the end of the year, we do have to keep in mind that they had access to good information that hasn't come down to us. So it's true that there was not uniformity in the early church. It's true that there were some Christians in Egypt, for example, who celebrated Christmas in May. But as you kind of look back on all of the dates that were proposed and dates that were tried, you can spot errors in a lot of them. And the bulk of opinion in both the East and the West always comes back to this basically 2-week period from late December into early January. So my suspicion is that the early church had information. It had sources or good oral tradition that remembered that Jesus was born in late December, early January, wintertime, end of the year. And so while December 25th may not be the day, it's likely close. And so that's what I learned, and I thought I would share it with you as we prepare for Christmas. And Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you.